Hey everyone, it's Eddie Winkler. Welcome back to our Crimstone and Jazz model series. This is part 5, the moment you've all been waiting for, and that will be painting your model. So before we get into it, I'm going to show you a few things you're going to need. You're going to need your parchment paper. You're going to need something to put your water in, your paint water, to mix the paint and to clean your brush. You're going to need your brushes. You're going to need your sponge, your container. These are just lids from that. We can use them as a quick palette if we need it. These are the bottles we're going to use. You need your paint. You need your models. Another thing I didn't mention, you need just some kind of stir. Wooden barbecue skewers, shish kebab skewers, come like a dozen in a pack. You can use those. Reason being, these paints are very inconsistent with their mixing, so you can shake them really good. They're a little thicker, so what we're going to do is open it, mix it a little, wipe it off with our napkin, just so we get a good mix before we start putting our paint on the wet palette. So I'm going to show you how to make a wet palette right now. So let's start opening some stuff up. Again, I'm not a professional. There are things that you can buy in this hobby that they make on the market. Why spend the money if you can make it on the cheap for yourself? Just because I bought this, I'm going to show you what to do. Again, I got 2 of these for $1.25. Just need a little water there. You need a little water in your pot to clean your brush. We're going to open this up. We'll take one of these. In one of the early videos, we used one of these containers to pour our alcohol and clean our model. This one we're going to be using to make our wet palette. So you can size it up and get your cuts. You can cut it with scissors. It's a dry sponge. You can cut it with anything. I have my other knife that I'm going to use, so just going to be careful and cut it. This black pad is designed for cutting, so you don't cut into your desk. This is an old desk anyway, so I'm not too concerned about it. So I have it that way. Now I want to cut that way. So that is what we are going to put our sponge into. If you notice, the sponge goes right there. Next thing we're going to do is you're going to use cold water or warm or regular room temperature water. You don't want warm water because as it cools, it's going to absorb some of your paints faster. So you want to get this water in here kind of soaking up. You don't want the water level on the side to pass up the sponge. So you're just going to get it just enough to where the sponge is going to start to soak up the moisture as the paint is on there. A little bit more. That might be too much. So we're going to pour a little bit into our pot. Your sponge is going to float like that there. Next thing you're going to need is your parchment paper. We'll push this aside. If you can see, I have this cool Matt Dalton reference piece. You can use any of your CRIM references from your cards, your graphic novels, your stickers, whatever it is you want. So, sheet of this parchment paper. Pretty much going to do the same thing. I'm just going to look. I'm going to cut roughly the size of that sponge that's in there. You can make hundreds and hundreds of these things with the parchment paper that you get from the dollar store. So if you notice, a little big, I'm going to cut a little more off of that. I know I said I was getting to the painting, but this is kind of the important steps. Again, you don't need the wet palette. You can simply slap this down. You can pour your paint in one of these. You can pour your paint on an old plate. You can do whatever you like. This is just if you wanted to get semi-better results and longer painting with your paint, keeping your paints a little wet. This is the way to do it. So if you notice, there's no water on top of the parchment paper. So you're going to put your parchment paper on the sponge and flatten it out. It will tend to curl up. If it starts to curl up, don't worry about it. Just let it curl up and take your finger and just start to nicely set it down. So if you notice, the parchment paper is on there. You can see probably some of the moisture seeping through. If you get little beads of water on top, that's okay. You don't want to see a lot of water on top. So then we're gonna take our paintbrushes, open these up. Each one of these can be used for a different function. We're probably gonna use 2 or 3 of these brushes. The rest you can just save for next time. So we're gonna use this longer one, and this longer one is basically gonna be our mixing brush. Tend to find the shorter the handle, the more control you're gonna have. So that's gonna be our base coating brush for the majority of the big model. And then these 2 paint brushes will have one for medium-sized detail and one for fine detail. This guy right here is going to be for taking our brush out and mixing it on our palette, mixing the paint on the palette. So I apologize again for my creaky chair and hitting the light. So right now I'm going to take our base coat, which is our darkest color. This is going to be CRIM's body. It's going to be the darker purple. You really only need one color. I know I have a mid-tone, highlight, and a shadow. This purple is pretty nice. I'm going to mix it up. Once again, be careful with spilling anything. It happens a lot. The more you paint, you tend to spill things. I've never done it, but I've had a friend use a coffee mug for his mixing water and his cleaning water. And I've been right next to him when he drank his mixing water, cleaning water, and thought it was his coffee or tea. It happens a lot. Seems, again, I've never done it, but don't put it past yourself. So I have that. I'm just gonna wipe this paint off, get it ready for next mixture. Throw this away, put this back on here. After I mix that up, I'm just gonna give it a little shake. I'm gonna take just a little dollop and drop it onto my palette. You'll notice if you're using this paint is thicker. It's kind of rubbery, which is not great, but it's what we're gonna use. You want to take a tiny bit of water out of your mix, and you're just gonna start mixing this. One thing you want to look for is when you take your paint, is it transparent? Is it too thin? Is it not thin enough? Want this consistency. We're going to start going over the bigger parts of the model. So what I tend to do when I paint is, if you notice, I'm going to paint as if I was coming from the inside to the outside. So I'm going to paint his skin first and then work my way up. So then I'll do the shirt, the belt, the buckle. This gives you less opportunity to make mistakes and start covering up and retracing all those steps. So we're gonna start with a skin. You're just gonna really thin layers. If you see it streaky, don't worry, just come back to it. One thing you don't want to do is, if you keep going over the same spot, you'll notice that you're gonna actually start to pull the paint that was drying back off of the model, and that is not good, because then you're gonna get a texture. So remember, we're gonna put a couple thin coats on this. I am staying away from the body or from the shirt as much as I can right now. We'll come back with a smaller brush. Again, this brush is just the one you want to use to get the majority of the big parts. We're gonna put probably 2 or 3 thin coats of this stuff on here. After a while, your paintbrush will start to dry. You don't have to do it now, but you just clean it off a little. You can dry it off on a napkin. I have a small towel off to the side that I usually dab it on. Another thing, when you put your paint on your brush, you don't want to put the paint all the way up into, I think that's the ferrule of the brush. What happens is your paint will dry inside there. It'll start to split your brushes, so you won't have a good paint job next time. So you want your brushes to stay clean. Even cheap brushes are gonna splay out more than regular, but you can take care of them so to make them last longer. So again, just gonna drop a couple more dollops in there. We'll use a little bit more water and start to mix it up. Then we will continue painting our model. don't want to go back and forth and all kinds of things. Little spots like this, that's okay. You want to make sure you get paint in there. If you don't worry, because again, that's a shadow, and if you can't see it, light's not hitting it and you can't see it, then it's okay if you don't get a bunch of paint in it. So that little spot where Jazz sits, it's okay if you don't get everything in there. Obviously gonna put glue in that spot, so it's not gonna be seen. Dab a little bit of water. You don't need a lot of water. Again, you're looking for like 1-to-1 ratio water to paint. I am staying away from this tank top as much as possible right now until I get my smaller brush. Make sure that your model is secure on your paint handle. You don't want them falling off. And already, you may not notice it on camera or even when you do it in person, but the Zenithal highlight is doing its job. The top looks a little more purple, a little brighter, and the bottom looks a little darker. We'll do the other side of his arm, and then we're gonna move to a smaller brush to start getting in those little cracks and crevices. If we get paint on something that is not purple, for example, this ice cream cone, it's okay. We're gonna paint over it. That's why I said we're gonna start with the inside out. So I might get some paint on the shirt. That's gonna be okay because we'll paint over it. With the shirt, we'll probably start with a gray. You see I got some purple on that ice cream cone there. That's totally okay. I'm gonna start going underneath. If you notice, he started coming off the paint handle. I don't want that. He's a little top heavy. Like I said, you can hold the model, but eventually it's gonna get in the way and your hand is gonna start to take off paint, and that's not what we want. Underneath his arm, I'm going to grab him by the head. It's a good thing we didn't do his head first. Sorry. Camera is right in front of my face, so it's kind of hard to film like that. Now what you might notice is where we put the arm together, you might have a crack. Might be able to see the little crack in his arm. Later on, maybe during the live stream, I will show you how to get rid of it. It does require a little bit more materials and skill. I wouldn't say a bunch of skill, but it's not like something that you need to do. But if you want a better looking model and you're worried about the cracks, I can take care of that. So we are gonna move to a smaller brush. I'm gonna set him down for a minute. Mix this, take this brush, clean that out. So if you notice, this brush is kind of laid out. It is a cheap brush, but all we're looking for really is, can it give us somewhat of a point? And when I say point, it can be this or this way. Hard to see. So this is flat. If you turn it to the side, that's as thin as I can get. So it's all right. Again, for what we're doing, it's gonna work. So let's get CRIM back in the frame. You don't want your paint too high, and we're gonna start getting close to the shirt. All right, you can get underneath, and you can notice on his face where I'm handling it, starting to, I tried to push it, starting to take the primer off a little. You don't want to do that too much, but we'll get to him. We'll get to that face soon enough. I'm seeing little spots. Once I get the inside of his skin here, his chest and his head, I will, oh, I just made a mistake. So I just put the wrong color on that palette. So I'm just gonna take that one off and reset. We're back. A little mishap there, but what I was about to say is, once I get this inner part of CRIM painted, inner chest, his head, I'll probably stop the video, and what you're gonna want to do is put another thin coat on top Same thing, same color, same spots. I know it seems tedious, but you will have a much better looking model in the end if you do that. So again, we're going to take our time, get inside there, just looking to paint his skin. If you get any on the shirt, don't worry about it, we'll come and clean that up. That's why if we would have did the shirt first and then came and did his head and his neck, we are most definitely going to get some paint in spots that we don't want those particular colors. So we start from the inside out. Most of the first layer of purple is done. So like I said, the only thing I'm going to do is I can start it off, but I think I could stop the video in a minute. I'm going to want to, parts that you painted first, it's easier to remember if you did right arm, left arm, chest, whatever. You're going to start with the parts that dried faster. It should be good enough for me to start with the second coat, but what you're going to want to look for is if you do this, if you start putting a layer on and you see that it's pulling paint off, get away from that spot, let that dry a little more before you start to completely ruin it. You might not know what you're looking for, but basically if you start to see that there is almost as if you're scraping like a sticker off, you'll notice little spots of paint coming up. Then like I said, you're going to want to stop and move on. I'll just let the video keep going. Just going to have to double speed it. Color. So you can tell that Phil Diaz is a fan of Lobo and Pitt and the Hulk and those more beefy, masculine, brawler type superheroes slash anti-heroes. Very cool design here on CRIM. Originally, the silhouette is my favorite character from the Lost Pages. Just because like that noir look looks pretty cool. But CRIM is starting to grow on me, not because of this paint job, but the more artists I see draw this, the more I think Phil's biased and tells him to put more time into it. Not that the other ones are bad, but the pieces coming out for these campaigns of CRIM are absolutely amazing. Kenneth Rocafort did a trading card for CRIM recently, and dear Lord, it's just absolutely amazing. Obviously it's Kenneth Rocafort, it looks great. So almost done here, a little bit more around his belly, and then we're gonna move on. So far he's looking decent. What I'm gonna do is let him dry. We'll come back and we will start to put some more color on him, and then once we get his skin done, we'll probably move on to Jazz. Right, so we're back and we're gonna start doing our mix. Let him dry a little bit. He should be okay. Now we're gonna take this color, the lighter color. I'm gonna drop about the same amount we dropped last time. That's the chair. We're gonna mix that with a big mixing brush. Again, with this color, we're gonna want a 1-to-1. Just brighten it up just a touch. We don't want it as dark as the dark color, and we don't want it as light as the mid color. So we're just gonna keep it there. So now when we go over this, we're not gonna want to paint deep in the crevices. We're gonna want to keep those purple, the dark purple. So for example, when I start with his muscles up here, I'm not gonna go inside where that little crack is. I'm gonna try to stay away from that, leave that purple. Just want to be on the raised edges. That's gonna create that highlight. If you notice, I'm staying away from down in there. This is the tedious part of painting. Just gotta take your time and do the work. And if you notice, it's starting to look a little lighter. I'm going to do that everywhere. Again, you might have to put 2 coats. You just don't want to be in the very deep recesses. And if you did get it in the recesses, it's okay. You'll still, there, I got a little bit in there. You'll still be all right. Again, this is for beginners, so mistakes are going to happen. We'll work this out there. It's going to look a little silly at first when you're like, these things are not connecting. Trust me, when the whole model's done and it's a more uniform look, then you'll like it a lot better. Switch to a different brush, smaller brush, just a little bit. Clean that one. Again, where his hands are, where his fingers are, I'm just gonna want to leave them, the innermost parts of his fingers, the deepest purple or the darkest purple. Keep hitting the camera. Move on to his chest. Let's see. And I think I'm gonna do his head first. I'm gonna want to stay away from. Again, if we get that blue line on his head, that blue streak, that's okay. But you want to stay just off of it, if possible. Get underneath there, above his cheek. Sorry. And any raised areas like his chin or his jawbone, those are the things you want to hit again while trying to stay out of the deepest crevices. I know Phil's been waiting for me to get this model painted. The painting part is not the hard part. The hard part was setting up the video, setting up the camera, being able to do all that. He's not exactly as pink as CRIM is right now. Basically, all these steps that we're doing, I'm just going to repeat them over and over with 2 or 3 different variations, adding a little bit of color each time. One thing I do have to mention to Phil is that in the books, and in the pinups and stickers and everything is a little bit of variation depending on who's coloring it. So sometimes to me he looks a little more purple, sometimes his tattoos are bluish, sometimes they're pink, but we're gonna go off of one of these references that we have. We're looking at the Matt Dalton piece right now, so we'll probably most likely use that. Again, we're going to do a 1-to-1 mix, just a little drop, and put the roughly the same amount, not scientific. And take our mixing brush, some water, a little bit of water, and just mix that up. We want to keep the paint on the actual parchment paper. If it gets off into the sponge, that's okay, but it's better that you don't. So, that being said, let's try to finish up this purple. Okay, as you can see, he's coming off of my paint handle there. So I am gonna take a break and return with the next color and hopefully try to reset him on this paint handle. So to speed things up a bit, we're gonna go to the next color, but instead of you watching me paint the entire model over again over the same spots, we're gonna get started and then I'll stop the video and then we'll come back with the next color and I'll show you what to do.
If you guys dug this video, go support us over at zaidcomics.com. You can buy all of our books, sign up for our newsletter, and get your very own CRIM Stone statue resin kit yourself. The link is in the description below.